All right, and we are right back here off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, 1410 ESPN Radio. In Dayton, Justin Kidder, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. We talked a little Reds a little bit ago. It kind of brought the mood down a little bit. Jacob got a little sad. Elliot was getting a little angry nonetheless, but that's kind of where we're at. There was a lot of expectations for the Cincinnati Reds coming into this season, and I remember back during spring training having a chance to catch up with our next guest, Mr. Ben Verlander, who's taken some time to hang out with us here on Off the Bench. Ben, we appreciate your time. Welcome in, sir.
Of course. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Hey, so last time we talked, you had me all jacked up and fired up about the Cincinnati Reds. I was actually fired up about the Reds before our conversation, but you added to the excitement. Look, things happen, injuries happen, but we saw the youth movement really just infuse some excitement into this fan base last year. Things a little murky for the Reds fan base right now, but from your perspective, from the outside looking in, following this team, what the heck has happened with the Reds this season outside of just the injury excuse, of course?
Yeah, I think you can use the injuries as a you know, if you want to just comb over it, you can say injuries have been a problem, but I think it's a little deeper than that. It's just been a frustrating year to watch. It just never felt like it clicked, and you know, that's not to say injuries haven't played a factor. Before the year even started, they were dealing with injuries, and then you know, the suspension to Marte, and there was just a lot that came up that really kind of put a damper on things right before the season started. And it just never really came to with this team. You know, I was really excited about the pitching staff that they have. And unfortunately, the offense just really wasn't as good as it needed to be. I thought it could be good enough. I thought the pitching would be really good and that the offense could be good enough and take another step forward. I do think we saw a step forward with Elly. The year that he's having is really good, and I do think that's promising. But I think a lot of guys kind of stayed put or took a step back, and that couldn't be afforded with the offense that the Reds have. They don't have those, you know, that superstar player other than like an Elly De La Cruz type. They don't have those huge bats in the offense. I didn't feel like they added enough offensively to really help this team be as good as they needed to, but I still thought they could be good enough. And then injury after injury after injury just really put a damper on it. But by and large, underperformance across the board and an underwhelming year for the Reds when I thought they could be a playoff team.
Ben Verlander with us. You mentioned Elly De La Cruz. Obviously, we expected him to take a big step this year, and he did that. From your expectations of what you expected from him in year two to where he's actually reached at this point, how special is Elly De La Cruz? And this is a guy that still has a lot of room to work on his game, and he's been beyond special this season. But from your perspective, how special of a player do the Reds have in Elly?
Oh, I don't even know if we've scratched the surface of Elly yet, which is what makes this so exciting. You know, you look back to last year and the things that he's improved on to get to where he has this year, and you still look at him and say, man, there is still so much room for improvement. And this guy's already an all-star. He's already stealing a million bases. He's already got the power has really come a long way. So, you know, when he's so young. So when he matures and in terms of as a baseball player, when his skills mature on the field, I think he's only going to continue to get better and better and better. And I already think he's a superstar. So we're talking about a potential best player in baseball, potential MVP someday. And I can't wait. I love everything about Elly. I love what he does on the field. I love the person he seemingly is off the field and his want to work on English and figure that out so that the fans that he can communicate better with them and they can communicate with them. For the All-Star game, he started learning Japanese. I mean, he's just an incredible person and player, and he's an anomaly in this league. I think he absolutely has an MVP award in his future.
Now, Ben, outside of your guy, Shohei Ohtani, would you say Elly De La Cruz is the second most exciting player in baseball as of right now?
I don't know. That's a tough spot to put me in. We got a guy in New York that's going to hit 1 million homers, and I feel like if I answer that question,
he's too old.
Without mentioning Aaron Judge, I would be executed, as I already am by Yankees Twitter on a nightly basis. So,
can you throw us a bone though? We don't win championships. We don't get to the playoffs. Just give us this. We can have this, right?
Here's what I will say. Elly De La Cruz is absolutely more exciting than Aaron Judge. Is he a better baseball player? No, I absolutely can't say that. But in terms of excitement on a baseball field, I mean, Elly De La Cruz is 1A and 1B with what Shohei's doing. So, yeah, I love Elly. I'm literally wearing an Elly shirt. It's EDL. I love it.
I'll take that answer. We'll take it. When you think about a small market team, at some point when you're a fan, you talk about going quote unquote all in. I thought that this year would be the year where it's like, okay, we work off of last year's exciting run. You know, we were expected to win 68 games. You turn out you win 83, and then this season it's all gone wrong. Everything that could have gone wrong this year, it's gone wrong. When do the Reds look at this roster and say, you know what, we believe in this roster, and this offseason we're going to go make some moves. We're going to spend. When does that come? Because after this year, I don't know if we're even remotely close.
Yeah, that happens last offseason, and it didn't. And that's where the frustration comes. Again, I'm not backing down from what I said. I thought the Reds were good enough to win the division. I thought they were a playoff team. I was wrong on that, but I did feel like they were still missing. Like, it just felt, okay, this team is so ready. They have a rotation that can have a nasty Hunter Green and Lodolo and Abbott, and they can be their rotation can be. Numbers-wise, it's going to be difficult to be a top rotation in baseball because it's in Cincinnati. But stuff-wise, they can have a top rotation in the game of baseball that nobody's going to want to face. And offensively, with Elly and obviously McClain ended up getting hurt, and Marte ended up getting suspended, and Friedel as well, and all of that. But I did feel like they were good enough. They was just missing like a, hey, you know what? Let's go grab a DH that's sitting. Let's go grab a JD Martinez and plug him into the lineup, or a guy like that. And they just didn't make that move. And I felt like with a really young team, a lot of these guys could be helped by a big veteran hitter. You know, I was so excited about the ability to have in a lineup Matt McClain, Elly, Encarnacion Strand, and just really see them flourish. And unfortunately, with injuries and a lack of making moves from the front office, it never clicked. And I do think there's a huge part of a team and an organization and players in the locker room of feeling that buy-in from the front office. And it's like, whoa, well, I knew we were going to be good, but this front office really believes in us and went out and got players to add around us. And that shows us a lot. And they didn't do that. And I felt like it needed to happen. I still feel like it needs to happen. It needs to happen this coming year. I don't want to waste these years of what we're going to see from Elly De La Cruz and this rotation. I mean, it's a nasty rotation. Go add around it. Go add a good offense. Go add some vets and go make the playoffs.
Yeah, Ben, we know what we have in Elly De La Cruz here in Cincinnati, obviously, but a lot of the other core guys have been out throughout this year, and a lot of the guys that we have seen play on a consistent basis haven't given us what a lot of fans expected. Do you still have confidence in this Reds core outside of Elly, or would you look to find some other players outside of the organization to compete for those spots, say at third base with Noelvin Marte after what we've seen from him this season?
I don't think it would be fair for me to give up on the core yet with all the injuries that came up. I do think CES can be a really good Major League Baseball player. I do think he showed flashes of it this year. I do think his injury was causing him some issues that people might not quite understand he was dealing with while he was playing. I do think Matt McClain is going to be good. Elly is obviously very good. So if we're talking the core on offense and pair that with what you have on pitching, in the pitching rotation, I do think it can be good enough. And I'm not ready to give up on that core. I just think at some point you can't just run with what you've grown from within. You have to add around it. And that's what we've seen with everybody that ends up having success over the long term, right? I mean, look at what the Baltimore Orioles are doing. They had their core come up, and then they added Corbin Burns. They've added relief pitching. They add some bats they bring in a DH at the deadline and Eloy Jimenez just to help. The Houston Astros, when their young core came up, they added around it with Justin and with Garrett Cole and with Michael Brantley. You can't just go forward with your young core because that's never quite going to work. Even the Royals, the Royals were awful last year.
Yeah.
And they realized, okay, we got a core coming up that can be pretty good. Bobby Witt Jr., we really believe in this guy. Let's go add an Adam Frazier and 2 guys in the rotation. I mean, you have to add around a young core for it to actually come to fruition. I just don't feel like the Reds are doing that well enough yet.
Another exciting storyline in baseball right now, obviously the fact that the other team in the state of Ohio, the Cleveland Guardians, multiple times throughout the year had the best record in baseball. They had full command of the AL Central, and right now you look at the Royals coming and screaming in behind them. We got to see them, take care of business against the Reds not too long ago. The Guardians are an interesting story. I've been down on them for a while because 5 straight years they are the bottom 5 in spending, but they keep winning. And while everyone celebrates that, I said that's a bad precedent to set. I don't want teams around baseball to say, see, we don't need to spend money to win. We just need to develop better. I like the players on the Guardians, so I'm not rooting against them, but I do find the humor from a front office standpoint that, hey, maybe you should have been more aggressive in the offseason. Maybe, just maybe, you could have been more aggressive at the trade deadline. I kind of like seeing the front office humbled a bit. I just hate that it's at the expense of what the players are doing on the field, which they've struggled down the stretch as well.
I completely agree with you. And over the last couple of years, I've started to go down this path of that Moneyball was terrible for the game of baseball. I mean, everybody loves the movie Moneyball, right? Everybody idolizes it. Everybody says, wow, what a great thing to come up with. What a great formula for winning. Well, fun fact, they make it seem like the A's won the World Series in that movie. They got throttled in the playoffs that year. And then in current day, the Tampa Bay Rays and what they're doing, it's this mixture of Moneyball and analytics. And, yeah, it can win you regular season games, but tell me when it's going to win you a World Series. Look at what the Rangers did last year. They went out and spent $1 billion on their middle infield and pitchers to put around them, and they won the World Series. And the Guardians this year, look, the Guardians aren't going to win the World Series this year. I don't think they're good enough. They've, like you said, they've had the best record in baseball for a lot of different times throughout the year, but never once have I looked at them and said, I think this team is good enough to win it all. I don't. I think Jose Ramirez is a superstar. I think Josh Naylor is really good. I love some of the pieces on that team, but I don't feel it. I mean, they have an elite back end, the best closer in baseball, but I just don't feel like they do enough, like they spend enough. And time again, the team that steps up and really adds around them typically has the best chances to win in October. And we see these teams get in all the time. The Guardians are going to get into the playoffs. We've seen the Rays in the playoffs countless times over the last decade. We see teams, we saw a team like the Diamondbacks get in last year. They got to the World Series. The Rays have gotten to the World Series. But where are those superstars that are going to help you win it? And not just a Jose Ramirez type. You need multiple. You need some studs in the rotation. You need multiple guys in the offense. And I just don't feel like the Guardians front office does enough to win. And I feel like they keep getting away with it because they skirt into the playoffs and maybe win a weak AL Central and have had really good spurts. But they're not spending enough when it comes time to it. They're going to get exposed in October. They just are. And I don't really see a way that doesn't happen. If the Guardians win the World Series, I'll go public and say, yeah, I'm an idiot. What was I talking about? But I don't see that being the case.
Would you have gone Scotty H or Pena at first base?
Good question. I don't know. Scotty.
I think you got to go Scotty H. Because otherwise, if you don't go Scotty H, you don't get the elite moment in that movie where he hits the home run and then you get to see the 21-game winning streak all culminating in magic. And shout out to Oakland. They're moving to Sacramento, so the movie really worked out for them.
It all has worked out perfectly, I would say. Yeah. Everything's going really well.
Moneyball saved the Sacramento Athletics. That's what that movie was about.
That's what people are saying.
Final question. This whole city has written off David Bell. They want this guy out of here yesterday. 6 years, not a lot to show for it. At the end of the day, in your opinion, because it's my opinion in baseball, there's 3 components of a roster, the players on the field, the front office, and ownership, that are more important than the manager. But and for some reason, this city blames the manager before everything else. In your opinion, should the Reds fire David Bell? Now, let me rephrase, because we don't advocate for calling for anybody's job. Should the Reds move on or look to move on to a new manager, maybe spark some new direction?
It's the same question.
Well, but it's a question you can explain to other people like you weren't calling for his job.
Look, I agree with you. I think the manager is the easy guy to put on a pedestal and say, you know what, he's the reason we're winning or the reason we're losing. And I think that's ridiculous. I think the biggest job a manager has is one during a regular season, managing players and time and who you pinch hit for and that stuff. And then October is where they really make a big difference. You see guys hitting the panic button all the time in October. You see the guys like Bruce Bochy that are cool, calm, and collected that make a big difference. I don't think it matters all that much. And again, I'm not saying it doesn't. You can have anybody go out there, but I think we put a little too much stock in how good a manager is during the regular season instead of blaming the front office. And the front office is quick to fire the manager as the first thing that they're going to do instead of looking in the mirror and saying we're the problem. So I wouldn't fire David Bell. I like him. I think he can do a good job. I just don't think he's had the pieces around him. It's not his fault that he doesn't have other players on the roster. It's not his fault that players get hurt. So I wouldn't fire him. I like him, and I think the front office needs to look in the mirror before blaming anyone else and say, maybe we could do more.
All right, we got Ben Verlander, awesome enough to give us some time here off the bench. 1410 ESPN Radio, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. We send you out with this. I know we're basically out of time, but Justin Verlander was one of the few that I've seen that really had positive things to say about the latest proposal for the 6-inning minimum rule for pitchers that baseball kind of threw out not too long ago. I just wanted you to kind of send us out with just your thoughts. Like I said, so many people came out with negative opinions on it. Justin Verlander was one of the first that I saw that was actually kind of speaking for it. He's one of the last old school pitchers I feel like we have in this game too. So it kind of doesn't surprise me, but just your overall thoughts on that proposal when you came across it for the first time.
Yeah, I think it's heading in the right direction. Obviously things need to get cleaned up, but I do think the essence of it is, starting pitchers should go deeper into games. I mean, I think people want that. We're not saying they need to go 8 innings, but like the day of the opener, like nobody looks at a box score and says, oh, hell yeah, the Tampa Bay Rays are starting an opener today. Let's go. And like nobody does that for a 4th or 5th starter either, but nobody wants to go to a game where there's an opener starting and there's no chance for a no-hitter. There's no chance for a dominant outing for a starter. So I do think the game needs to get back a little bit to the way it was. And every game needs to evolve with the times. And unfortunately right now we see pitchers that are going, less innings than ever before. We see pitcher injuries at an all-time high. And there's literally no correlation to pitchers going less deep into games and them not getting hurt as much. I mean, I talk to John Smoltz on my show every single week. He threw 1 million innings a year. They all did. And Tommy Johns were not a very common surgery to get. I mean, you just didn't see it quite as often, and they were throwing a ton of innings. So part of this is also like, hey, we need to groom pitchers to pitch properly. I mean, we have a problem in this game if we have a starting pitcher going 4 innings, throwing 102 miles an hour, striking out 9 guys in 4 innings and giving up 0 runs, and everybody's saying, wow, great start. That was incredible. No, it's not. Why? No, it's not. Help your team out. Go deeper into games. Help your bullpen. Learn to tone it back a little bit. And I think part of the reason that my brother is part of the old guard and saying like, hey, let's do this is my brother, when he first came up, could throw 103 miles an hour, but he wouldn't do it unless he had to. He would start the game throwing 92 to 93 and wouldn't throw harder until he needed to. Right now, you have pitchers coming out of the gates throwing as hard as they can every single pitch, spinning the ball as hard as they can every single pitch, and that's not good for your elbow. And if you say, hey, we need you to pitch 7 innings, then you can't do that. You have to figure out how to pitch and not throw 100% every single pitch. Your arm's not meant to do that. And I think this rule, if you're not looking at it just on the surface of, hey, this is dumb, why are we forcing this? Well, there's a lot of factors that go into it. I think it's heading in the right direction. I think we would need to clean up some of the rules and optics behind it, and 100 pitches or all those things that I think you need to dive more in on that, and whether you lose the DH or not. But regardless, I'm all on board with pitchers needing to go deeper into games and figuring out a way to do that.
All right, good stuff. Fox Sports MLB analyst, host of the Flippin' Bats podcast. Awesome enough to give us some time. Ben Verlander. Ben, you are the man, sir. Thank you so much for fitting us into your schedule. We'll talk soon, I hope. And thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Of course. Thanks, guys, for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. You got your fantasy draft. I know. Thank you guys for being patient. You got members only NFL fantasy draft coming up for members only. Thank you guys for tuning in. This has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.